Patrick Netherton Show, 11:30, The Tiger. He's Rogers. I'm Patrick. Hope everyone is doing well. Had a couple more people that joined in and liked the Patrick Netherton Show Facebook page. We appreciate that. But a man that we like is Ralph Russo, the lead college football writer for the Associated Press, and really the foremost expert in epidemiology among all college football cognoscenti, I would say, is Ralph Russo. And he joins us now from the Associated Press. Ralph, how are you, brother?
Well, I live with an epidemiologist, so I should know something.
Yeah.
Like a little of it rubbed off on me over the last year and a half of a pandemic. So yeah, I'll buy that.
Ralph,
I mean, it's a low bar to clear.
Ralph, I don't need to hear about your wife rubbing off on you, man. This is a children's show. Let's keep this PG, please. So we don't need any of that. Hey, yeah, it's interesting because we kind of thought, all right, as the summer progressed, we the numbers were going the right direction. We thought, okay, maybe we're gonna have some normalcy, full stadiums, masks, maybe not. We feel like we're good, and then we're kind of back where we started again. But we're sort of, I guess, we're just tired of trying to mitigate it, so we're just full steam ahead. Kind of give me some indication of what you foresee. Is this something that you think we're just going to kind of get through and plow through? Are we going to have some issues with COVID pop up? What are you sort of looking at as you look at this season?
Yeah, listen, the most important difference as far as, getting through the games is the players far outpace the vaccination rate of the population, right?
Right.
Now, we know that doesn't mean you can't get it, but it lowers the possibility, and if you're surrounded by a bunch of vaccinated people, it lowers the possibility more of you getting it and you being out for a while. So, and the protocols around players who are vaccinated, right? Like if you're vaccinated, you're not a close contact who has to quarantine. That was such a huge part of why we missed so many games last year, because without a vaccine, you had to quarantine
right.
if you were exposed to the virus. So you take a lot of that stuff off the table, and I think what it means is, and listen, all these conferences have said, you can't play teams, you forfeit.
Yep.
Right? Like we're not building in rescheduling time. We're not rescheduling games this year. If you can't show up with the team, you're forfeiting. So I think all that combined means that, will we have players miss games? Absolutely. What I don't think we're going to get, I honestly don't think we're going to see many, if any, forfeits.
Yeah.
We may get one. I think there's a possibility we may get one because, the virus is the virus and it's everywhere. But I think the chances of that are relatively slim. So that means I think we're going to play a lot of games. We're probably going to have players miss games at times, and that could affect games. I think what's more interesting is what's going to go on with in the stadiums with fans
mm-hmm.
and what schools may put vaccine requirements to get in or test requirements to get in, masks, no masks, maybe cutting back on crowds. I think that stuff is still very much up in the air. But I do think we can go into the season more confidently feeling like we're going to get the games in.
Did want to ask you about Ida, because obviously it hit the Gulf Coast here, and we saw a lot of flooding and wind problems through New Orleans, even so into Baton Rouge. LSU and the Saints both escaped, and then Ida became a pretty large rain event for you guys up in the Northeast. How are you, your family? How did everybody come out with that? Because I know y'all aren't necessarily used to having that kind of a deluge that we're used to on a much more regular basis.
No, and thank you for asking. So I'll be very honest. We luckily we're fine.
Yeah.
Immediately, we live in a neighborhood called Park Slope, and that is literal. It is on a slope, and we are toward the top of the slope. That helps a ton when it comes to flooding. We don't get a lot of flooding in our neighborhood. Now, we're super lucky. Places all over New York City and a lot more in Jersey. We're really feeling it and had far more damage and far more. Those people, there's plenty of people who got put out in some bad ways around the area, knock wood, whatever you want to call it. We were quite fortunate. We came away basically dry. And, of course, the odd thing today is it is the most perfect weather day in New York that we have had all year. It is 70 degrees, not a stitch of humidity, blue skies, and sunny. It is a gorgeous day, but hope, and which is good because it allows the people who were affected at least some relief and of being able to sort of bail out.
Did I see that? And correct me if I'm wrong. Did I see that it's the first time that New York's ever declared a flash flood warning or something like that?
I don't know if that's correct. I know we've had flash flood warnings. It might have to do with something along the lines of like the scope of it.
Right.
Like I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the entire city
yeah.
was under a flash flood warning. Listen, 7 inches of rain in Central Park is a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot anywhere. Doesn't matter where you are. That's a lot anywhere.
Yeah, that's a lot. And Jersey certainly got hit with it much worse. I mean, I don't know if anybody saw the picture of the road that leads to Rutgers Stadium, and Rutgers was supposed to open tonight against Temple. That game got pushed back to Saturday. Is called River Road. That's the main road it's not the only road, but it's the main road you drive into to get into their stadium. And it was completely it looked like a swamp or it looked quite literally like a river. It was completely covered over in water. So again, like my friends in Jersey are our compatriots here, across the bridges. They got hit a lot harder, I think, in many ways than the folks in New York.
All right. The other off-the-field thing besides COVID is NIL that popped up. And obviously, Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC was a big story. We'll get to that at some point. It's not going to be this year, so we have some time to unpack that. But the NIL stuff. And it feels like everyone is somewhere on the scale between this is the complete ruination of amateur athletics, that it's going to be, it's going to doom the sport. There have been a few of those, not a lot, a few. And then you have other people who are like, hey, get all you can, make all the money you can. I'm kind of curious where you fall on the spectrum of the NIL and the deals that we're starting to see populate with these college athletes.
Yeah, I'm definitely more towards the, get it while you can. I think that we're seeing a world in which, I think we have undervalued to a certain degree some of these players, right? I mean, I think a lot of them are not making big bucks. A lot of them are really making far from big bucks. But there is value in popularity. There is value in having a social media following. Obviously, there's a lot of value for some of these kids who have really big names attached to really big other names. Like, in other words, playing on big teams. We've heard about what Bryce Young and De'Ara King, the Miami quarterback, Bryce Young, the Alabama quarterback, and some of these kids are making, possibly six-figure deals and things along those lines. I think for a lot of other kids, it's a few bucks here and there, but nonetheless, still pretty cool. I think my two takeaways from it is whatever it is now, it will be very different over the next few years. We are in the what exactly should we be doing with this phase? And I think as rules change around it and just college sports governance changes, it will morph and maybe end up having some regulations around it. So I think there's that. And, I find myself thinking at a certain point, like a lot of this stuff is new and it's all sort of learned behavior. And at a certain point, it will all look kind of similar. So we look at one thing and go, oh, boy, that's an advantage for Team X. And then we realize, well, but Team Y can do that too.
Right.
So to a certain degree, the field will level to the extent where everybody's sort of doing the same. All the good ideas get stolen and everybody starts doing the same things. And then we get back to what it always is in college football. It's sort of like it's not really a level playing field, and everybody is doing sort of the same NIL things, but mostly the same really wealthy and resourceful schools end up being the ones on top.
Well,
I don't think it's necessarily going to tip the scales more and make it more imbalanced, but I also don't know if it's going to have a huge balancing effect.
Well, one of the most amusing things to me is part of the various legislations that have been passed, and it's obviously a state-by-state thing, but kind of a commonality is, at least on the NCAA level, you can't use this as an inducement to bring someone to your school. Basically, you can't use it as a recruiting tool. As if. Right, as if you're as if Nick Saban's not going to go, or Mac Brown or whoever is not going to go into some kid's house and go, "Hey, did you see? By the way, did you notice what Bryce Young got? Yeah, you want to play quarterback at Alabama? Like, yeah, I'm not saying you need to come to Alabama just because you might get $800,000, but it's not a bad idea, right? Like, come on,
Yeah.
As if this is not going to be used to recruit.
I think to a certain degree, they're all trying to position themselves as the NIL school. Like every school is trying to be like, no, we're the school that will, like, we can't be the one paying you, but we will position you to get these deals.
Yeah.
So, but again, I think in the long run, it just all sort of washes out. And all of a sudden, everybody's doing these things. And every team has a deal where you can make a little money. You can give the kids a little money from jersey sales. And every school is able to do some kind of team-wide deal like we saw earlier in this thing with Miami. And I think it was, I want to say, Florida today, who did some kind of deal where everybody on the team gets a little something from this local business. So I think those things are just going to become very common. And again, when everybody's doing it, I'm not sure what the advantage is.
Can I give you an advantage? Can I give you one advantage? One advantage is this. You may have seen the story. One of our good friends, Jordan Wright at Wright's Barbecue in Fayetteville, signed the entire Arkansas offensive line to an NIL deal. Now, they're not really getting any money. They're just getting food from one of the best barbecue restaurants that you'll see. The only real advantage, let me tell you, the only real advantage is a place like Wright's Barbecue or any of the places in Texas, they're going to get more than their fair share of offensive linemen now and defensive linemen now, because they got barbecue place. I mean, Pinkerton's in Houston just signed. I can't remember. It was the running back for Texas.
Oh yes, from Texas. Yes, John Robbins.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
I mean, I'm telling you, the only advantage out there is that the food and the barbecue. And I'm a barbecue guy, Ralph. The barbecue in Texas and some of these places like Wright's in Fayetteville, they're going to have an advantage there. It's the only advantage I could find.
So it's just because there's a barbecue joint in the Midwest that signed Notre Dame and Wisconsin's offensive line. Mm-hmm. But what you're telling me is, like, if you're choosing between barbecue, you're going Texas, Arkansas, over Wisconsin, Indiana, and I would agree. I would agree.
And even if that's not the case, right? You're choosing Texas or Arkansas or even Notre Dame or Wisconsin over Oregon or UCLA or USC or Colorado or any of these other places that don't have that available to you.
Which is just not going to have the barbecue. Yeah,
it's not going to have it.
Right.
It's the only advantage.
Because there'll be a smoothie deal in some places, where as opposed to in some other places, it'll be a barbecue deal.
Offensive linemen,
touche.
Linemen aren't going out for a sushi deal, is all I'm saying.
I do keep wondering if the overall takeaway, the most important thing that comes out of NIL is just offensive linemen being fed more.
Yes.
Right? Like Pittsburgh's quarterback did a deal where he gets to go to a restaurant with his offensive linemen.
Yeah, his offensive linemen get to eat.
Yeah, I just love the whole idea that the main thing fueling NIL is feeding offensive linemen. I just think that's great.
And as a guy the size of an offensive lineman, I do appreciate that. I appreciate any time. I wish I had an NIL deal with a barbecue place somewhere, because they would be losing money, I can assure you. Talking to Ralph Russo for the Associated Press. All right, on the field, kind of give me an idea of the storylines. What are some of the things that you're really intrigued to watch this season?
Yeah, I think the storyline is we have super teams, right? We a lot of people are sort of tired of it, right? Like, we're going into the season, and anybody who's making picking Clemson and Oklahoma and Ohio State and Alabama, and maybe you work Georgia in there, and rinse repeat, right?
Yep.
So I think the story becomes are we going to get something to disrupt the super teams? And is it something more than just, replace Alabama with Georgia, maybe replace Texas A&M with Alabama, or are we getting two SEC? Like, which of the super teams might have some flaws that could be usurped? And is there a team outside of that, like, let's say top 10, top 7 in the AP, because even in Iowa State, like Iowa State would be a huge deal if Iowa State makes the playoff, but
Sure.
Iowa State is also number 7 in the country. Like, they're not coming from way off the pace. They're still on the radar, and I think for a few years when the playoff first started, there was this sort of like very short-lived trend of like, oh, that team was 14th and they made the playoff. That team was 16th, like, and they made like the year Georgia played in the national championship game. That was a team that I think started number 16 in the country and really hit it in Kirby Smart's second year. Washington one year made it coming 14th. Like, before we really knew what Clemson was, I think they started 11th one year and made the playoff.
I do want to tell you that I appreciate you now coming to my side of things, that preseason polls are worthless and horrible.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that for us, Ralph, even though you have one of those preseason polls. I was going to ask you, how's Iowa State ranked number 7? They haven't even played a game yet. Like, who knows? Nobody knows what Iowa State is.
Well, I'm going to move on from that, but I do think but I do think that's, like, what is it possible that we will see somebody break the grip of the super team?
Yeah.
Right? Are we going to finally get even one team that we sort of go back and go, oh, that's a nice story that they broke through and made it? And I think, again, like, I think that would help whether it's just pull anybody from, the group that lies from 10 to 20. Just
a Pac-12 team. Can we just get a Pac-12 team into the playoff?
Yeah, like a Pac-12 team, second tier Big Ten team, the Wisconsin-Penn State sort of, grouping, something along those lines. I'd just be interested. I think that's the biggest and most interesting story. And that, and I will say this, and it leads to, and the two things are tied, right? If you're going to possibly have a super team falter a little bit, well, what position that, where things could get dysfunctional? Well, if you have a new quarterback and the new quarterback maybe needs a little time to onboard, maybe that's something that short circuits the super team. Listen, Bryce Young's a 5-star. He's probably going to be awesome in Alabama. But does he need a year or half a year or to really get rolling? C.J. Stroud at Ohio State. So I think these new quarterbacks at places that are considered super teams, I think adds a little element of like, oh, I'm interested to see how that thing works out.
Yeah, how would Mac Jones have replaced Tua Tagovailoa? It couldn't happen, right? There was no chance that Mac Jones could have been any good. Oh, wait, Bryce Young, here we go. Yeah.
No, and that's it. I mean, it's hard to say like, oh, like these teams are now vulnerable because they have new quarterbacks. Because the fact of the matter is, we know their new quarterbacks are 4 or 5-star recruits.
Yeah.
There's a ton of talent here. I guess the only thing it becomes is how well does that talent develop? How quickly, and does it leave that team again a little vulnerable to a couple of losses? 1 or 2 losses, and that could be enough to keep them out of the playoff. But again, I'm not necessarily predicting that, but I'm just saying, like, I think those are the things to look out for.
Last question. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about LSU and UCLA. That's a marquee game to get us going in week 1 on Saturday. What are your thoughts? Do you see this as, obviously a lot of people around here think this is, LSU's just going to handle UCLA. A lot of people don't seem to care about what UCLA did against Hawaii because it was Hawaii. What do you see when you look at that matchup?
Yeah, I don't care that much. I will say this. I mean, it's a sign of progress that UCLA went out there and just devastated Hawaii. That's what good teams do, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you want to see out of your better teams is that they don't mess around against the Hawaii. That said, listen, LSU is going to go in there with a much more talented roster. I think the one thing that's a little intriguing is, Chip Kelly seems to have now got his idea, his vision in place, right? That thing seems to be settling in. And LSU is coming off a year where it has a new offensive coordinator. It has a new defensive coordinator. And you do wonder if, like, when one team has more talent but the other team is a little more settled into its identity, how much that evens things up. Listen, I picked LSU to win the game. I think that the spread was like 2. My guess is they'll cover that. I wouldn't be surprised if they covered it fairly easily. I would be surprised if they won really easily. But I do find myself thinking like, yeah, this is 10 to 7 to 14 area.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, I just think LSU's got more. I just think LSU's got more talent, and it's just a matter of whether that talent all sort of gels together quickly.
Ralph, you are the best. No matter what I say about the preseason polls, go follow Ralph Russo at Ralph D. Russo AP, because his preseason poll deserves your love, even if it doesn't get mine.
I will never hold that against you.
Look, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time as always, brother. By the way, are you off going anywhere? Or are you staying at home?
I'm at home this weekend. I will be on the road a lot the rest of September,
Nice.
but I'm taking it all in this weekend because there's a lot to take in.
Well, and I'm sure you've missed it a little bit too. So, it's like
No doubt.
the rest of it. Brother, thank you so much for your time, man.
Take care, Patrick. Good
All
talk
right.
to you.
Ralph Russo from the Associated Press, lead college football writer.